All right. Hello. Welcome, everybody, to the weekly SIG Docs meeting. This is the APAC meeting, which is at 1 o'clock UTC time. I'm Jim Angel, one of SIG Docs co-chairs. And yeah, let's kick it off. Today's date is April 27th, 2021. And very quickly, no new contributors. I see a lot of returning, welcoming faces. So good to see everybody. And moving on to this week's updates and reminders. So this week's PR Wrangler is Brad Topol, and next week's PR Wrangler is nobody because of KubeCon EU, which is next week. And as always, approvers, make sure you know your scheduled PR Wrangler shifts. The link is in the agenda, and I will put the link into the chat here. If I can find if I can find the chat, let me see. Here we go. All right. And moving on to the release 122, I know that we're still early on in the release, so not too much of an update there. As far as I know, the dates have been published, but not much more than that. So I'll look for the release lead to fill us in the future as things start picking up. And moving on to the issues and PRs, this is a pretty light agenda today. So if you have anything you'd like to add, feel free to add it in for the issues or PRs and or discussion area. The first PR for discussion was brought up by Tim Bannister. And this PR, and I'll open it up, is PR number 27657. And this is about lines being too long in Markdown code. So I looked at this open issue, and it seems like it has to do with the fact that there's no word wrap in the git diff when they're running the comparisons, and it becomes challenging to read. And the proposal is essentially adding in line breaks, so it's easier to understand the difference there. Um, and I'm not sure if I captured that correctly, Chiming. I know that you have more context on this than I do. Do you have any other comments on the, I guess, the benefits of what is being proposed?
Um, yeah. So basically, the problem arises because we are using Git for diffs for comparison, especially when we want to track any changes upstream in the English website. We want to synchronize those changes to localization versions, but because the comparison is on a line by line basis. So if you have long lines that has 200, 300 words, it's very difficult to capture where exactly are the changes. So for future change tracking, this is very inconvenient. Sometimes it's very time consuming to find out the difference. So I think that is the same finding by other localization team as well. So I'd really propose some kind of line wraps, maybe 80 characters. If 80 character is too short, 120.
Gotcha. That's helpful context. And I would imagine this applies to any of the localization teams dealing with this. I'm curious. So my thoughts on this are really twofold, and I guess it makes complete sense from a localization standpoint, especially a git diff standpoint, to compare the two changes. And since you're doing a line by line comparison, if there's only a single word change, now that entire line or multiple paragraphs have been updated if they're not broken. However, I do wonder what the impacts of this would have on overall responsiveness of the website, as far as if you're on a mobile phone or a tablet or a desktop. Does that change? Do we know based on the line breaks? Like, does that impact the way that Hugo renders the pages at all?
No, yeah, that is a helpful concern. So I think there is some kind of misunderstanding of the Markdown syntax. So even if you break lines for long paragraphs, the paragraphs still remain the same. If you want two paragraphs, you will insert an actual empty line between the paragraphs. That's the syntax. So maybe some contributors are not well aware of this syntax. So that's the reason they are not breaking long lines.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if there's no impact to the overall readability and responsiveness of the website, I wouldn't mind either testing it myself or seeing the test done. I think it makes sense why we would want to do something like this, but I think at the same time, it's one of those things to make sure that there's no impact to the overall, I guess, readability of the website or formatting of the website. And Jihoon, welcome. I see you joined, and actually, we're discussing the current issue that was opened by yourself around the line wraps for the Markdown.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, because we are using the Hugo engine for the conversion of the whole website, Hugo works by converting the whole website into HTML in batch.
Mm-hmm.
That conversion won't impact our web responsiveness.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm wondering is if it's on a new line, if that new line is represented in Hugo, or if it's just going to just mash it all together. So let's say I had a giant ultra wide monitor and I had multiple lines in the Markdown file. If I open up that page on the website, does it make that single paragraph? So I still see the long line and it's just broken in the code base or in the Markdown. And that's what I'm not sure about.
I'm not sure either. Maybe we can do a double check.
Gotcha. So I'll leave a comment there. I personally don't have an opinion or really a comment on one way or the other. It sounds like this would be very helpful for localizations. And I think that any way we can support localization is helpful to the wider goals of SIG Docs. So I think that makes sense. If we do make this change, I have a feeling that we should definitely widely advertise it through the mailing list and other means of communication, potentially having a future discussion at the weekly meeting next week as well. But I would propose let's do a test on this and the impacts of what this would look like. And really the example being if we have two short lines that are touching each other on Markdown, if the screen is wide enough, does it put it on a single line or does it still break them into two lines? I think if it messes with responsiveness, I think it's going to be a harder sell. But I
It will
think
be put into a single line. It will be combined.
Gotcha. So yeah, if that's the case,
it will be
this seems to
combined
make
either by the Hugo engine or by the web browser.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, if that's the case, I'm very strongly for this. I think it makes a lot of sense. Cool. Yeah, so I say we test it out just to double check, and then we maybe bring this up next week at the weekly meeting, just to make sure everyone is on the same page. See if there's any differing opinions. I know we have a smaller team on the call right now, and I think if there's no objections, this makes a lot of sense for future documents.
Okay.
Before moving on, any questions or concerns around the line breaks?
Actually, it is very beneficial to Korean localization as well. Line breaking. Thank you.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The line breaking is very beneficial to Korean localization team as well. Thank you.
Yeah, so a +1 from the Korean localization team.
Yes.
Awesome. I will note that here. Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think we should just make sure that it is as we intend it to be. And then I think the other challenge is going to be potentially fixing future documents, but I wonder how, retroactively, I don't think there's an easy way to break all of the lines that are currently existing today. There are lines over, let's say, 180 characters. That might be something worth scripting or looking at in the future if we do go down this route.
So Jim, I just checked the source code of the generated HTML. For example, the install kube control in Linux.
Mm-hmm.
The HTML is pretty compact. All the lines are joined together properly. So this joining lines operation was done by Hugo. So it won't impact any browsing experience, I think.
Cool. Awesome. I think that sounds good. So it sounds like really the only action item here then, since you've tested it out, is just bring it up next week to make sure there's no differing or alternative opinions, and then potentially move forward. And once again, I think we can do this for future documents, but I don't know how we can really retroactively apply this to older ones without doing some sort of scripting or some sort of tooling to adjust older ones, which might be something to look into if we all agree this is the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So moving on to Tim Bannister had a second pull request here, and this is mentioning Zach Corlesson stepping down and becoming an emeritus status, which we'll talk more about a little bit later. Really just asking to fill in the Wrangler schedule, which I volunteered to do. So I don't see any impact or necessary action to be done there. I will take the action item to replace the PR Wrangler schedule, and we should be okay there.
Okay.
And moving on to reference generation, including kube components and config APIs. Is this, Jimmy, did you add this or?
Yeah, I just added. I was browsing the meeting minutes. I noticed that 2 weeks ago, this one was on the agenda. There were some complaints about the reference generation, not so smooth. I'm curious about the actual problems people met. Maybe I can fix them. So to be honest, this reference generation is not so straightforward, given that the Kubernetes source code organization is weird. So the whole Kubernetes repo cannot be imported, but we need to import it to parse the source comments. But things are becoming better and better now, because most of the packages we are using being rendered, are being staged. So we don't need to import the whole Kubernetes repo. That's a good thing. Another improvement done in the generator is we are switching to use Go mod for dependency managing. So in the future, I'm not envisioning a lot of problems generating the references.
Yeah, and so I don't recall the full context of 2 weeks ago. I'll double check and see if we have that video uploaded. If not, that's something I can help with, is upload the video.
It's on the agenda 2 weeks ago.
Gotcha. Yeah, and what I'm thinking is I'm taking a look here. The first thing about improving the reference generation process, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, that one.
Gotcha. So I want to say that, and this is from memory, so don't hold me to it, but I want to say it had to do with the way that the actual releases were triggered. And I think it had to do with something where the 121 release branch to build the docs for can't be built until the release is actually published and the site has already switched over. I think it's like a chicken and egg problem.
Right. That's something we have to do. We have to wait.
Yeah, so I really would like to revisit this definitely and talk a little more about it. And I want to make sure I capture this correctly, because I don't know if that was the entire issue, but that definitely was something that was brought up. And I don't know, maybe we could potentially build the reference docs off of one of the alphas or one of the release candidates prior to the release happening. But I know a lot of times the official tag doesn't exist, so that causes issues as well too, I believe.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, and I think the other thing too that came up was just the multiple efforts for around the reference generation. I think there was just some general confusion there. But yeah, let me double check. Let me make sure that video is published. And if there's something more we want to talk about, I say we just bring it up again either next week or at the next APAC meeting to deep dive into. But I don't think it's necessarily concerns with the fact that we're doing the reference generation. I think it's some of the nuances or the complexities of how reference generation is done and some of the different issues at the release cycle.
Okay. Okay.
Cool. Let me just make a note here. All right. So moving on to the localization update. Looks like Yoko, you're editing on the fly there. Do you want to give us a quick update on the Korean team?
Yeah. Actually, we hope to share. We are about to finish the first Korean localization milestone for 1.21. So it will be merged to master branch soon. And I hope to introduce good news, new member based on the Korean localization effort has been added. His name is Jae-hoon Seo. He's actually in this meeting, but I'm not sure he can speak now. Maybe he can chat. Hello. Yeah, that's all for the Korean localization.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Ji-hoon. I understand if you can't talk right now, but look forward to seeing more of you around here, and welcome. If there's anything we can do to help, let us know. Awesome. Cool. So moving on to the discussion. Really here, just wanted to call out and acknowledge all of the work that Zach Coralescent has done for SIG Docs. Reference to the pull request that was open to move Zach to Emeritus. It's unfortunate that we can have a wider audience here of more folks who have been impacted by the work that Zach has done throughout the years as part of the SIG Docs efforts. But a huge thank you to Zach, all the work that has been done with docs and documentation, localization. There is so much work that has been done in the SIG Docs community. Much a credit to Zach, and I know that if Zach were to be on this call, he would give the credit back to the community. And I think that's very characteristic of Zach. And many thanks for the years of time spent and effort in docs, and many thanks and many applause for future journeys and endeavors. Awesome. Cool. Is there anything else that folks would like to bring up to discuss?
No, from my side.
All right. Well, in that case, y'all have a good day or good evening, depending on where you're at in the world. And I look forward to chatting again soon. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.